In this very first budget proposal, President Trump has provided a plan to get to balance. You may not like how he had Director Mulvaney get there, but I'm looking for suggestions. Please, instead of complaining, share some ways to make a difference, or at least something that you liked. This year, we take an important first step forward in helping to change the way we do business here in Washington by focusing on the importance of a balanced budget. The reason this work is so important is because we must restore the trust of the American people in their government. I'll yield the floor to Ranking Member Sanders.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And Director Mulvaney, thanks very much for being with us this morning. And I would agree with the chairman on one point. We must restore faith with the American people and their government. Sadly, this budget does exactly the opposite. The Trump budget that was introduced this week constitutes a massive transfer of wealth from working families, the elderly, the children, the sick, the poor, the most vulnerable people in our country to the top 1%. It follows in the footsteps of the Trump-Ryan health care bill, which gives massive tax breaks to the people on top while throwing 23 million people off of the health insurance they currently have and dramatically raising premiums for older workers. This is a budget which says that if you are the wealthiest family in America, the Walton family of Walmart, you can get up to a $52 billion tax break through the repeal of the estate tax. Let me repeat that. Wealthiest family in America could get up to a $52 billion tax break. But at the same time, this budget says that if you are a lower income senior citizen, you will not be able to get one hot, nutritious meal a day that is currently provided to you by the Meals on Wheels program. This is a budget that says that if you are the second wealthiest family in America, the Koch brothers, a family, by the way, that has contributed hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into the Republican Party, your family can get up to a $38 billion tax break. But at the same time, if you are a working class young person trying to figure out how you can possibly go to college, your dream of a college education will disappear because of $143 billion in cuts to student financial assistance programs. This is a budget which says that if you are a member of the Trump family, you may receive a tax break of up to $4 billion, but if you are a child of a low-income family, you could well lose the health insurance you currently have through the Children's Health Insurance Program and massive cuts to Medicaid. When Donald Trump campaigned for president, he told the American people that he would be a different type of Republican, that he would take on the political and economic establishment, that he would stand up for working people, that he understood the pain that families all across this country were feeling. Well, sadly, this budget exposes all of that verbiage for what it really was, just cheap campaign rhetoric that was meant to get votes, nothing more than that. At a time when the very rich are already getting much richer, while the middle class continues to shrink, this is a budget of the billionaire class, by the billionaire class, and for the billionaire class. This is a budget which will make it harder for our kids to get a decent education, harder for working families to get the health care they desperately need, harder to protect our environment, and harder for the elderly to live out their retirement years in dignity. This is not a budget that takes on the political establishment. This is a budget of the political establishment. This is the Robin Hood principle in reverse. You take from the poor and you give to the very rich. The reality is that the budget that President Trump has proposed would break virtually every promise he made to working people of this country. Among many other promises that it breaks is not only massive cuts to Medicaid, but cuts to Social Security. This budget would make massive cuts to Social Security for people who have severe disabilities, children who have lost their parents, and the poor. And Director Mulvaney, please don't tell me that Social Security disability insurance program is not part of Social Security. Let's be clear. Social Security is not just a retirement program. It is an insurance program that protects millions of Americans who become disabled or lose their parents at a young age. The chairman said we have got to restore faith with the American people. He's exactly right. The way to do that is to totally reject this budget and create a budget that works for working families in this country, not just the billionaire class. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Our witness this morning is Mick Mulvaney, the Director of the Office of Management and Budget. Having only been confirmed by the Senate on February 16, 2017, it's safe to say that Director Mulvaney's had a busy few months. Prior to his time as the Director of OMB, he served the people of the 5th District of South Carolina as their congressman, where he was first elected in 2010. During his time in Congress, he served on both the Budget Committee and the Joint Economic Committee. We look forward to receiving your testimony. Director Mulvaney, please begin.
Chairman Enzi, Ranking Member Sanders, members of the committee, thank you so much. It's wonderful to be back here in this wonderful room to present to you the President's FY 2018 budget. The title on the cover is A New Foundation for American Greatness. As you can imagine, I've spent a lot of time in this document over the course of the last couple days and weeks. I wish now that I had changed the title on the cover. I wish that the title was A Taxpayer First Budget. And as I went through it, and I said, okay, we've got this title, we've got this name, it's the New Foundation for American Greatness. What's new about it? And one of the things that is new about it is that we actually did look at the expenditures through the eyes of the people who pay for it. I think for too long we probably just look at the impact on the folks receiving taxpayer dollars and not nearly enough time focusing on the folks who pay taxpayer dollars. And that is new in this budget this year. What else is new? It balances within 10 years, something that the previous administration was incapable or unwilling to do for their 8 years in office. It's an opportunity for us to have a conversation about borrowing money. We do borrow money in this budget, as President Obama did before us and President Bush did before him. We do something unusual when we compare it to the previous administration. We actually have a plan to pay it back. Because if you borrow money, if you take money from people and have no intention and no plan of ever giving it back to them, that is not debt. That is theft. And that is what the previous 8 budgets offered by an administration did. Took money with no prospect ever of giving it back to the people from whom you borrowed it. And we changed that because we have a plan for how to borrow money in the short term and then start to pay it back to the people. Every single man, woman, and child in this room owes the federal government $60,000. My 17-year-old triplets, $60,000. Every single one of your constituents, $60,000. You might be able to look them in the eye and say, that's okay. The president decided to look them in the eye and say, you know what? That's not right. It cannot go on forever. We have to have a plan for figuring out how to start paying back the money that we have borrowed from people for all of these years. The next word in the budget was foundation, and I tried to come up with what was the foundation, what we were trying to get to when we picked that word. What was the foundation for American greatness? And the foundation for the American greatness is 3% growth. Every single time I'm in the Oval Office talking to the president, whether it's on budgets, tax policy, trade policy, energy policy, regulatory policy, those discussions are driven by one goal and one goal only. How do we get America back on track in the economy? There are some folks who believe, and many of those folks happen to work at the Congressional Budget Office, that 1.9% growth is the best we can do forever. We refuse to accept in this administration that pessimistic view of the future. We refuse to accept that the new normal is 1.9%, especially when the history of this nation is above 3%. And that goes back to the founding. You go back to World War II if you want to. For some reason, some of us want to accept the fact that we will only ever grow at below 2% growth again. If you are in this room today or watching this and you are 30 years old, you have never had a job as an adult in a truly healthy American economy. And an economy at 3% is so much different than an economy at 2%. It's hard to describe except like this. In the 1990s, when I was a younger man, we had excellent growth in this country. We had it under a Democrat administration and a Republican-controlled Congress. If you got fired back then during a healthy American economy, you could find another job easily. If you did not like your job, you could quit and start your own economy, your own business. That type of optimism dies in a 1.9% economic growth world, and we need it back. And everything we do in this administration, including the principles in this budget, are designed to get us back to 3% growth. We do all that, by the way. I'd still fund the President's priorities. We've talked about them before: national security, border security, law enforcement, veterans, school choice, paid parental leave. I hope we get a chance to talk about that today. Infrastructure, money in here for that. We can talk about that. We do not touch Social Security, retirement, or Medicare. I look forward to having that discussion. We also focus, Chairman Enzi, on unauthorized programs. $310 billion. One of the questions I ask, if you think it's so important, why don't you vote to reauthorize it? I think that's a fair question when you look at this through the perspective of the people who are paying for it. I've enjoyed watching all the politicians on TV this week saying, oh, we wish we spent more money on this program, and the program is unauthorized. And I cannot go back to the taxpayers and say, yeah, I want to spend more money on a program that Congress doesn't care enough about to even vote on anymore. That's no longer defensible. So we do all that, and we balance the budget within 10 years because we look at the government differently. We are no longer going to measure compassion by the number of programs or the number of people on those programs. We are going to measure compassion by the number of people we get off of those programs and back in charge of their own lives. We no longer measure success by how much money we spend, but by the number of people we actually help. And that is the last part of the budget, which is American greatness. So, anyway, with that, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to the hearing today. Look forward to answering your questions. I hope I do a decent job with it, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here to present the President's budget.
Thank you. You're one of the few people that ever finished up a minute ahead of time.
I'm from the House. We only get 5 minutes over there, Mr. Enzi. Y'all's 7 minutes is very, very generous.
Now we do turn to questions, and I'll explain the process to committee members. Each member will have 5 minutes for questions, beginning with myself and then Senator Sanders. Following the two of us, I'll alternate questions between Republicans and the minority. All members who are in attendance when the hearing began will be recognized in the order of seniority. For those who arrived after the hearing began, you're on the list in order of arrival. If your turn's on the list to be recognized and you aren't available, you'll be moved to the bottom of the list, and the next senator on that side will be asked questions. So we will start the questions. Director Mulvaney, the President's budget reduces deficits for OMB's pre-policy baseline by $5 6/10 trillion, while 3 and 6 rate assumptions concerning the roughly $100 billion in defaulted student loans the department currently manages. It seems we keep finding that the student loan programs are more expensive than the government expects. How does the President's budget proposal attempt to contain student loan costs going forward?
I have not reviewed the FSA report, but I think we all know that there was a lot of pressure, I think, during the Affordable Care Act debate to look to the student loans to be generating money. And you can ask yourself whether or not there was pressure to show unreasonably rosy numbers at the time as part of the Obamacare discussion. As we look forward, though, and talk about what the President proposed when he was campaigning, the President made specific promises regarding taking the variety of repayment programs that are out there today to repay student loans and condense them into one. And that's exactly what we've done in the budget. We take a single income-based program and tie your repayments of your student debt to the amount of money that you are making after you graduate. And that leads to a circumstance where if you're making less money, you'll pay back less of your loan. If you're making more, you'll pay back more. When President Obama, I think, introduced something similar, he suggested that we forgive the debt after 20 years. We actually moved that to 15 years. But by doing it in a single plan that's actually easier for folks to use, and we expect them to use it, and by making the variables depending on income, we actually save a considerable amount of money.
Thank you. My time's expired. Senator Sanders.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Before we go further, I find it a little bit unfair that Mr. Mulvaney and many people in the Trump administration disparage the director of the CBO when it was Tom Price, the former Republican chairman of the Budget Committee, who appointed Dr. Hall in the first place. So let's get that clear. Mr. Mulvaney, as you know, the United States today has more income and wealth inequality than any major country on earth. Top 1/10 of 1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. 52% of all new income today is going to the top 1%. But your budget thinks that it is good public policy to provide $52 billion in tax breaks to the wealthiest family in this country, a family already worth $128 billion. You think that a family like the Walton family, where one guy there owns 4 Ferraris and 1 Maserati that are worth more than $65 million, are just in desperate need of massive, massive tax breaks. You think that Sheldon Adelson, who among other things contributed $5 million for the Trump inaugural, is in need of a massive tax break, as well as the Koch brothers. So my question is pretty simple, and I want you to tell the American people why you think it is a good idea to give $3 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1% at a time when the rich are becoming much richer, while at the same time you're going to throw 17 million children in this country off of health insurance because of the unconscionable cuts that you are making to Medicaid, why you're going to throw seniors in the state of Wyoming or the state of Vermont off the Meals on Wheels program, maybe the one nutritious program that they get a day, why you're going to throw women and low-income babies off of the WIC program at a time when infant mortality rates in this country was already high. Do you really think it is a great idea to tell a low-income pregnant woman that you're going to take away the WIC program, take away nutrition programs from children in order to give a massive tax break of $52 billion to the Walton family? Please explain your logic to the American people.
I'll see if I can handle each of those in reverse. Actually, let me deal with the CBO first. I can't disparage who I don't know, and I don't think I've ever disparaged the director of the
You made a
CBO.
dismissive remark about him.
I made it.
Even the CBO. You guys appointed the director.
And again, all I'm telling you is that the results are awful.
But you appointed him, so let's go with that.
I measure performance by results, Mr. Sanders. And if you continuously
Your opinion is
numbers,
that the results are terrible. I'm suggesting that it was a member of the Trump administration who appointed this gentleman, not some kind of radical Democrat.
So we can agree then that the CBO puts out bad data.
No,
okay.
we can't. We can agree that you guys are beating up on a man that you appointed because you don't like his results. But anyhow, get back to the question. Why tax breaks for billionaires and
they're
cuts
not right.
for working class kids?
WIC serves all the projected participants. There's no change there. Meals on Wheels is not reduced at all. The change that we make is through the
CBDG program, which you eliminate.
The block grant thing.
So you eliminate the block grant. You tell me that funds the program. You tell me that doesn't have an impact on the program.
No, the program is funded, Senator, through the old age or senior nutrition program, I think through HHS, which we don't change.
No, that's not true.
No, it is true, actually. The CDBG program is a block grant to the states, and some states do choose to use some of that
and you
money
eliminate
on
that
Meals
program.
on Wheels, and that total.
All right, the bottom line is,
Senator. I mean, if you
go ahead, answer the question.
The total money for Meals on Wheels that comes from CDBG is 3%. That's it.
Yeah,
and I don't know how you can possibly contend that we're.
But you are eliminating the program that funds not only Meals on Wheels but many other programs at the discretion of governors and mayors.
I would be more than happy to have a long discussion about CDBGs. You asked about Medicaid as well. The slashing of Medicaid, the dramatic cuts to Medicaid, is a slower growth rate in Medicaid. There's 1 year exception during the Affordable Care Act the American Health Care Act, where the bill calls for the end to expansion, and there's a small reduction that year. But generally speaking, over the 10-year budget, Medicaid spending goes up.
Yeah, but so does healthcare inflation. We go through these games every single year. Inflation is going up a lot faster than the money that you're putting in. Bottom line is, tell me, let me get back to one question.
Sure.
Why do you think the Walton family needs a $52 billion tax break?
My guess is that you're basing that assertion on the only tax detail that we have in the budget.
The repeal of the estate tax. Exactly.
Right. And if we want to have a talk about why we're repealing that, I'd be more than happy to do that.
Good. Let's tell me.
Because ordinary people are paying more.
No, ordinary people do not have a wealth of $128 billion.
The average,
that's not an ordinary person.
The average increase across this nation since
You're not answering the question. The question is, answer the question. The wealthiest family in America gets a $52 billion tax break as a result of the repeal of the estate tax.
That's correct.
Tell the American people why you think that's good when you cut Medicaid and you cut programs for kids.
Again, we don't cut Medicaid. We're talking about repealing Obamacare. The results that you
23
mentioned,
million people off of health insurance. That's right.
Which is a CBO number that I think you just agreed could be wrong at the outset.
I didn't agree to that at all.
Okay. That we repeal Obamacare.
Why does a billionaire family get a $52 billion tax break? Please tell the American people.
Because we think it's wrong that real ordinary folks lose coverage, and we want to get rid of
ordinary people. Is the Walton family an ordinary family?
No, they're not. They're extraordinary. But ordinary people are losing coverage today under Obamacare.
I asked you why the wealthiest family in America is getting a $52 billion tax break.
And I'm answering the question by saying because we repeal Obamacare.
No, you and the estate tax, which applies to the top 0.2%.
Senator, okay, I'm sorry. I thought the assumption was we were looking at the tax reductions that are contained in Obamacare repeal.
No, that's not what we're talking about. No.
Okay.
We're talking about the repeal of the estate tax, which you just mentioned.
The budget assumes a deficit-neutral tax plan, because when we wrote the budget, we did not have nearly enough specifics to assume what you're assuming, which is the specific reductions. Yes, the proposals that the White House published about 3 or 4 weeks ago, the principles that we set forward does include a reduction of the estate tax.
Repeal of the estate tax, sir.
You said, yeah, you're absolutely right. It is a repeal of the estate tax, but I think it's mathematically impossible to take those general principles and assume a direct impact on a particular family.
No, that's not.
Nobody can do it. I've seen estimates from groups that say, "Oh, that's going to add the deficit by $2 trillion to $10 trillion." People are just
that's really not
numbers.
true. I mean, we don't know when people are going to be dying. That's for sure. But you can make those estimates.
We don't know that people are going to be dying.
No, you don't know when somebody is going to be dying. But the truth is that if the family is worth $100,
I'm pretty sure they're going to die eventually.
That we can be pretty sure of.
Well, at least we agree on something. Thank you.
Senator Graham.
That was borderline fascinating. So, for 8 years, President Obama presented a budget, which was a proposal, and got 0 votes in the United States Senate or the United States House. It's fair to say we're going to continue that trend.
I might get one, too, Senator.
You might get one, but it won't be mine. And let me tell you why. I really appreciate you trying to balance the budget in 10 years. You got the Budget Control Act numbers to deal with. That's correct, right? That's the constraint we imposed on you. And if you're going to balance the budget in 10 years, there's really no good ways to do it. Obama increased taxes by $3.1 trillion in 2017. I think that would devastate the economy. That's probably why I got no votes. Some of the cuts you've made, I think, will have an effect that the country probably doesn't wish for. But you're in a spot of having to balance the budget, increase military spending because we need it, and that makes you, with the BC Act numbers, make very tough choices. So I appreciate you trying.
And we didn't touch Social Security, retirement, or Medicare.
Okay, and so that's my question. Let's not fool people. You did a really good job. The Meals on Wheels is not being gutted. The block grant portion is being eliminated, and that's 3% of funding, is what you said?
Maximum 3%.
So please quit saying things that are not true. There's enough we can say about this budget that is true. So the bottom line is, I would like to eliminate the death tax because I just don't like the concept of taxing people's estate when they die, because every time they made a move while they lived, you tax it. I'd rather have the Walton family take the money and give it away rather than the government grabbing it after they die, because I think the chief philanthropists in this country are a lot of the wealthy people you talked about, and they're doing a lot of good things. They may have a Ferrari in the garage, but I can tell you when it comes to conservation and other things, the Walton family are contributing. So it's just a philosophical difference. If it were up to me, we would have no death tax because we tax you every time you move while you live. So the bottom line, these are just philosophical debates. It's not meanness, it's just we just disagree. But the one thing I don't want the public to be misled by is that you do nothing in terms of Medicare and Social Security insolvency, which is coming. Is that correct?
It's correct, sir. We don't make any proposed changes to Social Security retirement.
If you were able to, if you were unleashed by the president, would you not want to get a grand bargain where we clean up the tax code, take away some deductions for the few at the expense of the many, and save Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, Medicare and Social Security from insolvency, which is coming?
Senator, let me answer it this way. When I sat here 3 months ago, and y'all asked me what I was going to do, because sometimes I would disagree with the president, which I thought was one of the reasons he hired me, was that I would lay out options for him. And I did that. And I went into the office. I think we had 4 hour-long meetings on mandatory programs. And I gave him a list of proposed mandatory changes. And at the end of the last meeting, he went, yes, 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 no, no, no. And the answers for no, no, no were Social Security, retirement, Medicare. Because he said, look, I looked people in the eye when I ran for office. I promised I wouldn't change them. I'm keeping that promise.
But here's what the president needs to do. He needs to look people in the eye and tell him that that's an impossible promise if you're serious about getting out of debt. Now, Mr. President, quit playing the game everybody else plays up here. By 2042, Medicare and Social Security alone will consume all the revenue sent to Washington. That's the projection. Is that correct?
I've seen similar numbers, yes, sir.
Because the baby boomers retire in mass, of which I am one. So you can't skip over Medicare. You can't skip over Social Security if you're serious about preventing us from becoming Greece. And to skip over these programs is to allow them to die over time. So the one thing I would say to my Republican colleagues who believe you don't need entitlement reform, including the president, to keep us from becoming Greece, you're wrong. And Mr. Mulvaney, you know the right solution.
I would deliver that message to the President.
Well, thank you. And you have been the solution in my view. Thank you for what you did with the ports. Very innovative solution to funding ports. We'll have a disagreement about MOX, but let me tell you one thing about the budget that does bother me. Soft power. Do you agree with me that we're never going to win the war on terror just through dropping bombs on terrorists?
Senator, I agree that's one of the greatest military challenges we face. You know why we did what we did. Again, it was the president keeping his promise to spend less money on foreign aid.
All I can tell you is that I don't know what it cost the country to ignore Afghanistan before 9/11 to the taxpayer. But when you shoot women in soccer stadiums for sport, when you blow up statues of anybody's religion, to expect nothing to come your way is a huge mistake to the American taxpayer. The King of Jordan is the best ally we could hope to have. We reduced his funding by $279 million. I got a call from the ambassador of Jordan saying, what did we do wrong? Nothing, ma'am. Georgia, a frontline state in the crosshairs of Putin, 66% reduction in their assistance. These people are not owed a dime by the American taxpayer. Foreign aid is 1% of the budget, but I will tell you this, Mr. Mulvaney, from my humble point of view, if we don't help the King of Jordan more at a time of critical need, his kingdom could fall. If we don't push back from Russia and help those in the crosshairs of having their democracy destroyed, I don't know what that cost to the taxpayer is, but to me it is an unacceptable cost. So the reason I'd vote no is because soft power is destroyed in this budget.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Mr. Mulvaney, can we talk about the tax cuts, tax reform proposal? You just said that you assume that the tax reform plan is going to be deficit neutral. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
And your presentation to this committee states that it is deficit neutral, correct?
Yeah, basically, Senator, we had 3 choices, which is we could assume the tax plan, which is still in its very early stages. It's not really a plan.
So there's no scoring on it yet. That's an assumption.
Either add to the deficit, subtract from the deficit, or be deficit neutral, and we picked the third, the middle way.
And the way that you get to that conclusion is that you recognize that there will be immediate revenue reductions from lower tax rates and calculate that they will be offset by increased revenues from enhanced economic activity. And they offset each other to deficit neutrality.
With respect, sir, no, that's not the calculation we went through.
Okay. What was the calculation?
We went through the list of exclusions that are reduced, loopholes that are closed, deductions that are removed. I can't remember what the number that we assigned to the ending. The proposal includes to remove the deduction for state and local taxes, which is a huge number. We get rid of a wide variety of personal deductions, including, I think, everything except, I think the proposal has some mortgage
So
interest
your
to keep
testimony here is that you are not assuming any growth from tax revenues as a result of increased economic activity in reaching the deficit neutrality. That is all going to be tax dollars in, tax dollars out, no added growth as the basis for deficit neutrality.
I don't know if I'm agreeing or disagreeing with you, but let me tell you what we did. We assumed economic growth. Certainly it's part of the, as I mentioned in my opening statement, the assumptions that how we got to 3% growth, tax policies were part of it. And certainly when we do go to 3% growth, we assume that government revenues go up. So we assume that there is growth, but we did not use those numbers to say that the tax policy was deficit neutral.
So the tax policy, as you foresee it, will be one that is deficit neutral without regard to growth, without regard to the increased growth that you assign to the tax policy itself. There's a circularity, you know, where people say, well, we're going to change the tax code, and that is going to increase revenues, and then we're going to bake those revenues back into the tax code. That is not going to be a manner in which you achieve deficit neutrality when you get your tax code proposal together.
Again, I think we're agreeing, but just to use my own words, is that